Jasper signed the papers before Honora had even taken her coat off. That was the part she would never fully explain to anyone afterward. Not the divorce itself, not the woman standing near the window with her hand resting on Jasper's shoulder like she had already measured the space and decided it belonged to her. The part that stayed was the coat. The drive home from St. Catherine's had taken 40 minutes in rain that came sideways off the highway, and the wool was still damp when she walked through the front door of the house she had helped pay for with 3 years of her own architectural commissions while Jasper's company found its footing. The coat was still cold. Her father's hands had been cold too when she left his room. She had not wanted to leave. The nurse had said there was time. There wasn't always, but this time there appeared to be, and Jasper had sent a message asking her to come home early, that there was something important they needed to discuss. She had kissed her father's forehead and told him she would be back before morning. She had driven home in the rain. She had opened the front door and Jasper was already signing. Honora May Stroud, 33, wife of Jasper Stroud and junior partner at the architectural firm Cove and Marsh, stood in the doorway of her own dining room and looked at the legal folders spread across the table. She had found at an estate sale 4 years ago because she liked the way the grain ran long and clean down the centerboard. Now the grain was covered with paper. Jasper Stroud, 36, founder and CEO of Stroud Metrics, sat at the head of the table in the dark suit he wore for investor meetings, his pen moving across line after line without looking up. Eudora Stroud, 60, mother of Jasper, and a woman who had spent 3 years making Honora feel like a placeholder, sat near the sideboard with a glass of red wine and an expression she reserved for occasions she considered victories. And near the window stood Remy Dahl, 31, director of marketing at Stroud Metrics, and the reason the last 6 months of Honora's marriage had felt like standing on a floor that shifted slightly every time she took a step. Never quite breaking, just never fully holding. Remy was wearing Honora's scarf. It was the pale gold one, Italian silk, a gift from Honora's father on her 30th birthday. She had left it on the armchair in the study 3 weeks ago and had looked for it twice since, and now it was knotted loosely at Remy's throat like it had always lived there. Honora did not scream. She looked at the scarf, then at Jasper, then at the papers. "What is this?" she said. Jasper looked up. His jaw was set in the way it got when he had already rehearsed the conversation and was irritated at being interrupted before he could deliver it in order. He said, "I need you to sign tonight. The attorney can file first thing tomorrow." Orrin Banks, 44, Honora's trust attorney and one of the few people in the city who understood the full shape of her life, was not in the room. He would be, but not yet. Eudora swirled her wine. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be," she said. "Jasper has been more than generous with the settlement terms." Honora looked at Remy, who had the grace to look at the window. She said, "I was at the hospital." Jasper's pen paused. "I didn't know you were going tonight." "You didn't ask." The silence that followed was the first honest thing in the room. Eudora set her glass down. She said, "Jasper has spent a long time carrying this marriage. Sometimes people simply outgrow each other. It isn't cruelty, it's clarity." Honora waited for Jasper to say something. He didn't. He capped his pen. She thought about a different room, 3 years earlier, in an office building on a block that smelled of printer toner and anxiety. Stroud Metrics had been 9 months old and already bleeding cash. The software worked. The pitch didn't. Jasper had stood in front of a men's room mirror, 2 floors below the investor suite, and told her he was going to throw up. She had straightened his tie and told him that investors didn't fund perfect stories. They funded founders who understood their own risk. She had rewritten his opening line on the back of a coffee receipt in her bag and handed it to him outside the door. He had walked in and delivered it like he had always known it. She had never told anyone she wrote that line. She looked at the papers now. She looked at her handwriting on the grocery list pinned to the corkboard in the kitchen, visible through the open doorway. She thought about how long she had been writing things for Jasper that no one knew were hers. She did not beg. She did not raise her voice. She only removed her wedding ring and laid it on top of the settlement folder. Then the front door opened. Orrin Banks came in from the rain with a slim case under one arm and water on his glasses, and the particular focused expression he wore when he had already read something 3 times and was prepared to be very precise about it. He said, "Before anything is executed, there is a disclosure attached to Honora's family trust that needs to be on record." Jasper's attorney, a careful man named Fellmore, who had said almost nothing all evening, looked up. Jasper barely turned his head. "Whatever her family left her isn't part of this. I'm not contesting it." Orrin removed a document from his case. I understand. I just need the record to reflect that the asset was disclosed and that you elected not to request valuation. Jasper waved a hand. Fine. Felmore's voice sharpened slightly. Jasper, I would recommend we take 10 minutes to... I want this finished tonight. Jasper reached for the pen. Felmore's mouth closed. He wrote something on his legal pad and underlined it twice. Jasper signed the remaining pages. Each one was quieter than it should have been. Honora watched his hand move and thought about how those same hands had shaken so badly during his first investor meeting that she had taken the presentation clicker from him under the table because his grip was failing. He had secured the funding. He had told her at dinner that night that he couldn't have done it without her. She had believed him. She still believed him. That was the part she couldn't quite carry out of the room with her. When the last page was signed, Eudora lifted her wineglass toward Remy. She said, "To my son finally choosing a woman who knows how to move with where he's going." Remy smiled. Jasper did not stop it. Honora picked up her coat from the chair where she had dropped it when she came in. The wool was still cold. She said quietly, "You didn't just end a marriage tonight. You showed me exactly who you decided to become once you thought you didn't need anyone watching." No one answered. She walked out. On the porch, the rain had thinned to a mist. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. The message came from a number she recognized immediately, the main line for the Sinclair Capital Executive Office, which she had only ever seen on documents forwarded to a private account Jasper had never once asked about in 3 years. The message read, "Miss Sinclair, your father passed at 9:47 p.m. The succession instrument is now active. Please contact the board at your earliest convenience." Honora stood on the porch of the house Jasper was already remaking in his mind. Her father was gone. Her marriage was gone. Both had finished inside the same 2 hours quietly, in rooms that smelled of paperwork and other people's wine. She got in her car and drove. The Sinclair estate was 40 minutes north, through a stretch of old highway that ran along the river her father had once told her was the reason he built where he built. Water, he had said, tells you everything about the land around it. Where it moves, slowly, it stays. Where it rushes, it moves on. She had been 11. She had not understood it then. She understood it now. The gate opened before she reached it. The housekeeper, Marta, 64, who had kept the house since Honora's mother died, and who was the only woman Honora had ever let herself cry in front of without apology, was standing in the doorway. She said one sentence. "He held on until he knew you were safe." Honora closed her eyes for a moment. Then she walked in. The study was exactly as it had always been. Dark bookshelves. The iron lamp her father bought at auction decades ago. The desk that was slightly too wide for the room, which he had always said was intentional. A desk that fits a room makes a man comfortable, but a desk that doesn't quite fit keeps him sharp. 3 people were already inside. Orrin, who had left the house in Honora's rearview mirror and driven directly here. Beside him stood Meredith Osei, 51, Senior General Counsel for Sinclair Capital Group, and the woman who had managed the legal architecture of the family trust for 12 years. And near the window stood Albrecht Tully, 58, the board's acting chairman, and the man responsible for the company's daily operations since her father's health had declined. Meredith spoke first. "The trust is clear. You are the sole controlling beneficiary. The position of chairwoman is yours upon acceptance, which must be formalized within 72 hours. Honora looked at her father's chair behind the desk. She didn't sit in it. She said, "What is the current valuation?" Albrecht answered, "Approximately 18 billion consolidated. The number is clean." Honora had grown up knowing the number existed somewhere behind her life, behind the name she never used, behind the inheritance she had explicitly refused to carry into her marriage. She had wanted Jasper to love her without the door she could open. She had wanted to be chosen for what she was in a room where no one knew what she came from. She understood now, in the way her father had tried to explain and she had dismissed as unnecessary, that what she had called protection was also a form of holding her breath for 3 years, while a man she loved decided she was only as valuable as what she could do for him that particular week. Orrin placed a small cedar box on the desk. "Your father left this for you." Inside was a letter, written in her father's handwriting. The handwriting of a man who believed something written by hand carried different weight than something typed. She read it. It said, in the way her father said everything, without softening, but with the weight of someone who had chosen every word. "You spent so long trying to be loved without being known. I understand why. I am the reason the name is heavy. But there is a difference between hiding your inheritance and hiding yourself. Don't let anyone mistake one for the other. If the man you chose sees you fully now and chooses to stay, stay. If he only sees the door, close it behind you and build something that deserves you on the other side. She folded the letter. She said, "What else does the board have this quarter?" Albrecht opened a second folder. He said, "Sinclair Capital's private fund is currently reviewing a short list of early growth technology companies for strategic investment. One of them is Stroud Metrics." The room went very quiet. Honora felt the sound of Jasper's pen moving across the settlement papers, layer over the sound of her father's last breath, which she had not been there to hear. Meredith watched her face. Honora said, "What is their financial position?" Albrecht answered, "Revenue growth looks strong in the submission materials. Cash reserves are thin. They've been projecting renewal contracts as confirmed revenue, but at least 3 of their 5 largest renewal agreements are still in active negotiation. The projected figures assume outcomes that aren't secured." Honora knew those contracts. She had helped draft the language in 2 of them 2 years ago, when Jasper had handed her the client files and said she was better at reading what people actually wanted. She had flagged the ambiguity then. She had told him not to treat those renewals as closed numbers until the client signed. He had thanked her and moved on. She said, "I will not participate in the Stroud Metrics review. I will not ask anyone to favor it or flag it for any reason connected to my history with that company. The file goes through the same process as every other company on the list." Albrecht nodded. "Understood." She said, "These standards apply across the board. Revenue backed only by executed contracts or properly disclosed as estimates. Full vendor certification. Independent review of any related party relationships, including any marketing or consulting firms with personal ties to leadership." Meredith wrote it down. Honora said, "Those aren't rules I'm creating for Jasper. They are rules that should have existed before tonight. Put them in writing and apply them to everything going forward." She sat down in her father's chair. It was slightly too wide for her too. She supposed that was the point. 3 weeks passed. In that time, Honora slept in short intervals, drank too much coffee, and learned the full width of an empire she had spent her adult life refusing to examine directly. $18 billion spread across real estate holdings, private credit, infrastructure development, and a fund management arm that had been quietly shaping decisions in 4 cities for 30 years. Her father had not built loudly. He had built the way water moves through limestone. Slowly, completely, in a way that only becomes visible once the shape of everything around it has already changed. She attended board briefings every morning. She read every document Albrecht placed in front of her. She asked questions that made the senior executives sit up slightly straighter, because the follow-ups came faster than they expected, and the questions were specific enough to reveal that she had already read the annexes. One of them, a senior partner named Garraway, who had served under her father for 15 years, told her in the 3rd week that she reminded him of Harrison Sinclair on his best days. He said it like a compliment. She received it like one. She did not make a public announcement. Oren asked twice. She said not yet. She needed to understand what her signature would mean for the people who depended on Sinclair Capital before she stood in front of them as the person responsible for it. She visited a supply warehouse where her father's infrastructure contracts kept a distribution network running for 3 hospital systems. She walked Technology Park, where Sinclair-backed development firms occupied 4 buildings. She sat in the back of a break room on a Tuesday and listened to workers talk about their shift rotations and their benefit renewals, and how the previous management had handled a safety complaint the year before. She took notes. She thought, occasionally, about Remy standing in her dining room in her scarf, and she let the thought arrive and move through her without doing anything with it, because the anger was real, but it wasn't the thing in front of her. The health plan renewals were. The safety complaint follow-up was. The supply contracts expiring in 60 days were. She put the anger somewhere useful and kept working. Meanwhile, across the city, Stroud Metrics was finalizing its investor submission. Jasper had added 2 outside consultants. Remy's firm had produced a brand campaign positioning him as a category-defining voice in the enterprise analytics space. The language was polished and confident and written entirely on top of a cash position that would not survive another quarter without new capital. Wells Tanaka, 27, Stroud Metrics head of financial analysis, and the only employee who had been there from the first month, sat in his office on a Tuesday night, looking at the revenue projections in the submission and feeling a familiar tightness in his chest. He had seen this shape before, not the exact numbers, but the architecture of them. The way a company could look inevitable in a pitch deck and precarious in the actual bank records at the same moment. He sent a message to Jasper flagging the renewal contract language. He said those agreements couldn't be presented as closed revenue without a disclosure. Jasper forwarded the message to Remy. Remy replied, "Don't let him slow the momentum." Jasper wrote back to Wells, "Add a footnote and prepare the submission as is." Wells stared at the message for a long time. Then he opened a separate document and started typing. The Sinclair Capital Annual Partner Conference was held on a Thursday in April at the Meridian Center, the kind of building that made people lower their voices when they entered. Not because they were asked to, but because the ceiling heights suggested they should. The program listed the keynote speaker as Honora Sinclair, Chairwoman, Sinclair Capital Group. Jasper was in the audience. He had received an invitation through Northwick Partners, a fund management subsidiary he'd been cultivating for months. He had come with Remy and the quiet certainty of a man who believed he was about to be seen. He was right, he simply didn't know yet by whom. When the lights shifted and the name appeared on the screen behind the dais, Jasper read it once, then again. His mind worked to rearrange the letters into coincidence. Sinclair was a common name. It had to be. Then Honora walked out. She wore a charcoal suit and small gold earrings, and her hair pulled back the way she had always worn it when she was focused on something that mattered. No wedding ring. She walked to the podium the way she moved through rooms she was certain of. Not loudly, not with performance, but with the kind of steadiness that makes the space around a person feel organized, simply because they've entered it. She did not look for Jasper first. That landed harder than if she had. She said, "My father believed that capital is not simply money. It is a record of what you trusted and who you trusted, and whether that trust was warranted. The work of this institution has always been to take that record seriously." Jasper's hands were very still on the armrests of his chair. She spoke for 20 minutes. She talked about governance, accountability, the difference between companies that told investors what they wanted to hear, and companies that told investors what they needed to know. She introduced the new standards Sinclair Capital would apply to every company in its review cycle. Executed contracts only as confirmed revenue, full vendor disclosure and certification, independent audits of any related party business relationship. She did not say Jasper's name. She didn't need to. 3 rows behind him, Wells sat with a press credential and a folder on his lap, and the expression of a man who had made a decision alone in the dark and was now watching it arrive in the light, larger than he had expected. Remy was looking at her phone. Whatever she was reading, she stopped looking at the stage. Eudora, who had come because she liked to be in rooms that confirmed her son's ascent, held the conference program in both hands and read the name at the top of it one more time. After the keynote, the investment committee chair stepped to the side podium and announced that 3 companies in the current review cycle had been moved into enhanced diligence pending resolution of unresolved disclosure concerns. He did not name them. He didn't have to. Jasper's phone vibrated. The message was from his board chair, "Emergency call now." Remy's phone lit up at the same moment. Her attorney had received a formal document request from Sinclair Capital's legal team. All invoices, billing categories, scope records, and communications related to her firm's engagement with Stroud Metrics going back 24 months. Remy read the message. She put her phone face down on her knee. Jasper saw her do it. Honora was surrounded by executives near the edge of the stage when Jasper came down the aisle. She saw him before he reached her. She let him come. He said, "Honora." His voice was not the voice from the dining room. The certainty was gone. What was left sounded like a man speaking from inside a realization that had arrived correctly, but much too late. He said, "I didn't know." She said, "I know you didn't." He said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She said, "In the beginning, because I wanted to be chosen without it. Later, because I had already seen who you were without it, and I thought that would be enough." He said, "If I had known." She stopped him gently. "That's the part you're still not seeing. If knowing would have changed anything, then the problem was never the secret. The problem was what you needed the door for." He had no answer to that. She said, "I hope you become someone your next chapter deserves, I mean that." She turned back to the executives waiting for her. He stood in the center of the hall with no one beside him. Remy was on the phone near the exit, her back to him. His board chair was waiting just outside with 2 other directors and the particular quiet of people who have already made a decision and are waiting to deliver it. Wells walked past him and paused for only a moment. He said quietly, "I sent them the contract documents, the real revenue figures. I should have done it sooner." Jasper looked at him. Wells said, "She always knew the real figures too. She just fixed them before anyone saw them, every time." Then Wells kept walking. The board removed Jasper from his role within 30 days. Remy's firm lost the Stroud contract and 3 others once the billing inconsistencies entered the public record. Eudora did not attend any events for a while after that. Stroud Metrics did not collapse. Sinclair Capital's investment committee determined that the company's core technology was sound, and its junior employees, the analysts and engineers who had stayed through 2 difficult quarters because they believed in the product, not the founder, deserved to have that work protected. Sinclair acquired a minority position, installed an independent board, and brought in new executive leadership. Wells was asked to stay on as head of financial operations. He accepted. Honora signed the acquisition documents in her father's study at his 2-wide desk with the pen from the cedar box. She had used it 3 times now for things that mattered. Each time it felt slightly less like inheritance and slightly more like something she had earned by being honest about what it meant to carry it. After the signing, she sat alone at the desk for a while. Marta brought coffee and set it on the edge without asking and left, without saying anything, which was the most precise form of kindness. A week later, Jasper sent a message. He said he knew an apology wasn't enough. He said it anyway. She read it twice. She believed it. She did not respond, not because she was cruel, and not because she had closed off the forgiveness she was working towards slowly and on her own schedule. She didn't respond because there is a particular kind of sorry that arrives after consequences, and it deserves to land somewhere without an answer, to sit long enough with the person who spoke it to mean something real. She thought that was what Jasper needed. She thought it might be what she needed too. She set the phone down. Outside the study window, the river her father had built beside ran high from spring rain, moving steadily through the land in the way water does when it has already decided where it's going. Not rushing, not uncertain, just moving. The way things that have chosen to survive eventually do. She picked up the pen. There was more to sign. Some people spend years making themselves smaller so someone else can feel larger. The cost of that isn't always visible until the bill arrives in full, in a room you didn't expect, in the name you never stopped being.